This past week, we saw the first in a series of dominoes that need to fall if Donald Trump is ever likely to see the inside of a Georgia courtroom. This came when a Fulton County grand jury investigating efforts by Trump and his allies to overturn Trump's 2020 election loss in Georgia concluded its investigation. The grand jury's recommendations, including whether criminal charges should be filed, have yet to be made public, but are now in the hands of Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis. There are a wide range of potential charges available to her, including those used for organized criminal activity like RICO. Perhaps most concerning for Trump, in light of his now infamous phone call to Georgia's Secretary of State asking him to, quote, find the 11,780 votes he needed to defeat Biden in Georgia, is a state law against, quote, criminal solicitation to commit election fraud. So what can we expect now? Joining me this morning is Gwen Keyes Fleming. She's the former DeKalb County District Attorney and the co-author of the Brookings Institution report, Fulton County, Georgia's Trump Investigation. For those of you who haven't read it, I would urge you to get out there and actually read that report because, Gwen, that report was just so comprehensive, but I know that you and the other authors drafted it before the conclusion of this grand jury's investigation. So I wanted to ask you, based on your experience as a prosecutor and, frankly, everything you know about this case, can we expect to see a Trump indictment out of Fulton County in the next few months?
I think that's the big question. The report itself was based on the evidence that was available in the public realm. So I'm quite sure the Fulton County DA's office has significantly more information and evidence than what we as outsiders may have. But as the report outlined, just based on what has been publicly reported, there is a substantial likelihood of possible charges on several different types of crimes, including those in the election code, like you mentioned.
So, Gwen, in just over a week, we all, as in America, could learn a lot more about Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election when a judge will decide on January 24th whether the grand jury's report should be made public. Most of us do know, Gwen, grand juries operate in secrecy and in confidentiality. So, in your opinion, what are the chances that the public will be able to ultimately read that report?
Well, and again, this is a special grand jury, so it's a little different from the regular grand jury in a couple of ways. One is this report that, at least in my experience, has become public in past instances. And again, this special grand jury has asked that the report be made public. But the regular grand jury's deliberations and things are usually not publicly known. And so that really is the next step. The DA's office now has at least some recommendations from the grand jury, and we don't know what they are, as you mentioned, but to the extent that they recommend that she pursue charges, she would go to a regular grand jury, offer them a bill of indictment, and see if they decide that there is sufficient evidence of crimes to move forward and actually true bill or formally present charges against certain defendants.
And based upon that distinction with a difference, as you've described, between that special grand jury that was impaneled, that's been doing the investigation so far, and a regular grand jury, which we know actually meets on Tuesdays in Fulton County, and January 24th is a Tuesday. Explain to our viewers whether or not, if the special grand jury's recommendations are not to pursue charges, is Fani Willis or any regular grand jury necessarily bound by those recommendations?
She's not necessarily bound, but again, that would present some challenges because basically a small group of Fulton County residents has heard some of the best evidence that she could present. And if they decide that charges are not appropriate, I can't imagine that she would go against that recommendation unless there's some pretty compelling reasons. So again, it'll be interesting to see what's in the report. It'll be interesting to see what and when Fani makes a move to bring charges. As you mentioned, the grand jury meets on Tuesdays. It's actually Tuesdays and Fridays, so she could do it later that week. But there's also the question, as you know from your own experience, that as soon as she files, it could be that some defendants will seek a speedy trial demand. And so rather than have that filed in the middle of a term, she may wait until the beginning of a new term. So she has the full timeline to be able to honor that demand, as opposed to it being cut down by 20% if she files it here in January.
I got about a minute left. I did want to ask you, Gwen, one kind of looming consideration, as you and I know as prosecutors, it's not always if you've got the probable cause. It's not if you have on all fours, you meet the elements of a crime. You got to consider juries, right? And the possibility of jury nullification. We also have Donald Trump already announcing he's running for president in 2024. Do you think that factors into the calculus for DA Fani Willis in terms of bringing an indictment?
I think it's something that is in the back of the mind of every prosecutor, but it never rises to the level where you would fail to pursue charges. Again, our jobs are, and when I was a former district attorney, it's your job to follow the evidence. And so if there's evidence of a crime occurring, it's your job to present it to the grand jury and let them decide. Sometimes you win those cases, sometimes you don't, but you never fail to move forward for fear of losing.
Gwen Keys-Fleming, you're going to come back because we're going to have, I'm sure, I think, a lot to talk about because I think an indictment is going to be coming for Donald Trump. Thank you for joining us this morning, though. I appreciate having you here.
My honor. Thank you.